This is John Edward Willie, and today I'm going to read a journal entry that I actually wrote yesterday. And this entry is sort of philosophical. It's sort of a meditation or reverie upon that experience we all have, which is waking up. And what I propose is that that space between sleeping and waking is perhaps the closest thing to a sacred space, philosophically speaking, that is an experience from which we can draw reflections. Of course, these may mean something to me that they don't mean to you, but this journal entry is just sort of written in reflection upon this universal human experience that lasts for perhaps 5-10 minutes. But it's a state that can be associated with childhood wonder and awe. And I think that that's the kind of experience that is really powerful in awakening philosophical and poetic thinking. And there's so much beauty and so much meaning that I think comes out of investigating what I here call a liminal space. I sort of see this window before our mind turns on and starts telling us who we are and what we're doing as being a golden opportunity to sort of see reality almost as it is. And so that sort of butts up against many of our common preconceptions about, where reality resides and what truth is. But anyways, this is for May 18th, 2026. And this is about the space between sleeping and waking as an opportunity to see life clearly, which I call a liminal space, as well as a kind of defense of sleepiness as a source of creativity, discovery, and critical uncovering. Every morning, across the immense expanse of this planet, a quiet and universal rupture occurs in the fabric of human experience. Before the first alarm rings, before the internal monologue resumes its familiar rhythmic cadence, there's an absolute moment of total suspension. You open your eyes, and for a handful of fleeting seconds, you are entirely nobody. You possess no history, no immediate trajectory, no grievances, and no triumphs. There is only the raw, unadorned fact of awareness existing in an empty room. This initial state is frequently characterized by a profound sense of being out of it. It is the norm, rather than the exception, to feel entirely out of place upon returning to consciousness, to look around a familiar space and find it temporarily stripped of point, direction, or meaning. We frequently treat this morning fog as a defect, a lingering sluggishness to quickly be burned off with caffeine and forward momentum. Yet, if we look closer, this disorientation is not a cognitive failure at all. It is a direct encounter with the baseline human condition. No matter where an individual sits in the social or economic hierarchy, no matter how brilliant their intellect or how meticulously organized their life, they too awake without coherence. The corporate executive, the artist, the laborer, and the academic all cross the exact same threshold of early morning formlessness. For a brief window of time, the grand narratives we construct about our lives are entirely offline, and the raw truth of our creaturely existence is exposed. Luckily, or perhaps just inevitably by the design of our environments, a ready-made coherency is always waiting to claim us. It is built directly into the rigid grid of time and space we inhabit. As the fog begins to clear, our identity filters back into the brain like a slow, inescapable gas. It arrives via language, through the invisible form of culture, and via the immediate demands of our environment. The external framework is an orientation system we cannot easily slip out of, except by accident or through monumental disciplined effort. Normally, we benefit immensely from existing within these boundaries. We require labels, categories, calendars, and social calculus just to function. They protect us from the sheer overwhelming weight of raw existence by telling us who we are in relation to others, whose task might be accomplished by noon, or where we fit into the local geography, or how to interpret the sensory data flooding our senses. This temporary framework provides a vital transition and translation mechanism, allowing us to connect the microscopic specifics of our daily routines to the grand generalities of a functional society. However, an existential vulnerability underlies this arrangement. Even the most robust personal story, the clearest sense of career direction, or the most unshakable confidence is fundamentally unstable. Who you are is not a solid, permanent monument built within the mind. Instead, who you are is a fragile fiction that must be actively retold, remade, and reimagined every single day. The waking identity is an active performance, one that requires a continuous maintenance from the moment we open our eyes. There is a fascinating divergence between the lives of people who claim to live and the lives they actually experience at the level of raw consciousness. If you were to ask any of the billions of individuals on Earth what they were doing with their day, they would offer a structured narrative about going to work, raising children, or pursuing goals. But this is merely a retroactive story we tell to ourselves to maintain the illusion of control. What interests the observer of reality is not the curated self-image, but the raw, unedited experience that the mind confronts before that story is turned on. In that space between deep sleep and fully integrated conscious thought, there exists a disconnected fissure. This is the symbolic and literal territory of the early morning. It is a psychological DMZ where reality lives most vibrantly within us, precisely because it has not yet been domesticated by our habits. In this space, our confusion, our uncertainty, our tired steps, and our sluggish thoughts are not obstacles to reality. They are reality itself. This is the exact site where we frantically scramble to reconstruct our daytime egos, where we stitch back together the necessary illusions, the compromises, and comfortable lives that we allow to step out and knock on our front door and look coherently at the rest of the world. I don't think that makes sense. This transitional zone can be conceptualized as a liminal mezzanine. That's what I mean to say, that it's a way of stepping through that door and stepping into the world. I guess I didn't edit this well enough. This transitional zone can be conceptualized as a liminal mezzanine, a structural platform suspended halfway between the dark basement of the unconscious mind and the main floor of active social performance. It is a highly specific state of consciousness that is almost universally overlooked because of our cultural conditioning, which implores us to rush through it. We treat it as an awkward hallway to be traversed as quickly as possible on the way to productivity. An inverse of this mezzanine occurs briefly at twilight, when the structured daytime world begins to decay back into dark. But while the evening mezzanine is heavy with the exhaustion of a spent day, the morning mezzanine is uniquely charged with an unfiltered, bewildering clarity. It is an area of profound inspiration, not because it offers clear answers, but because it exposes the sheer strangeness of being anything at all. The distortions of the early morning are fundamentally more authentic than the fake cohesion of our midday personas. To perceive the world from the mezzanine is to see the raw materials of existence before they are packaged for consumption. It is an encounter with what might be called a morass of soupy signifiers, shapes without names, urges without targets, and awareness without an owner. When we find ourselves standing in this liminal zone, holding the jumbled, incoherent mass of our raw experience, there are three distinct ontological postures we can assume. The first is total surrender to the inertia, giving in to the confusion and formlessness mass without making any attempt to organize it. In this state, the self remains dissolved, the day cannot begin, and the individual is paralyzed by the sheer weight of an undifferentiated reality. The second posture, which is the most common, is a rigid and almost frantic reconstruction. We gather the complexity of the morning mess and force fit it back into a neat, tidy box of schedules, goals, and identities. Coherence is successfully restored, but the cost of denying the underlying mystery of experience, of existence. The daily illusions are simply tightly stitched back up so we can function. But there is a third possibility, a third ontological possibility, one that is far more elusive and profound, which is pure observation. This means simply watching and witnessing the jumbled mass of the self and the world without reacting, judging, or attempting to fix it. Choosing to simply observe does not mean altering your external behavior. The observer still eventually makes the coffee, gets dressed, and goes to work. What changes is the internal relationship to the narrative. By refusing to immediately react to the morning incoherency, an extraordinary truth becomes apparent. The lack of certainty is not a crisis. We do not actually require a grand metaphysical conclusion, an airtight personal identity, or a neat set of principles to exist. The morning mezzanine offers us a brief daily window to witness the universe naked, allowing us to see what we are before we dress ourselves up in the stories of our everyday lives. So that's my second journal entry from yesterday. I spent so long working on this, and I sort of justify it as being practice for writing. That is, practice in terms of sentence construction. That's my primary focus right now, is learning how to better construct more fascinating sentences, but also to write in an understated way, which doesn't give in to reductivism. But I can see that I really like that piece a lot more than I did when I had written it, because what I can see is going on is that I can rework it. You know, there are, it has been said, three fundamental principles, like in writing, one of which it's extremely frustrating and agonizing, and it's pure hell. And that's what it was like when I started the morning, or two mornings, in fact, when I did recordings while walking after waking up. I did a recording on my phone within a half an hour after waking up over 2 days. And I culled from that recording the journal entry, and it was partially by hand, partially typed. And it was frustrating because I was simply doing it as a practice, as a way of enacting this process that I know can produce the raw material of writing. But the second principle, besides it being pure hell, is that revision and reiteration is what redeems writing. And of course, I'm not going to spend forever editing a journal entry, but I probably did spend way too much time editing it because it took like 6 or 7 hours total to write this and the other one that I have also recorded, the other journal entry for, I believe, May 18th, yeah, 2026. But what I like about this is that as opposed to the first one that I'd written and recorded, this has the possibility of becoming an essay or something else. It has the possibility of being turned into an essay about the morning mezzanine, as I call it. And so I see this practice of producing journal writing as a step form, as a platform towards other writing, the primary aim of which are essays. I love essays as a way of doing what I do best. I think of all things and all times, the composition of essays is sort of where I'm at, and that's what I'm sort of hell-bent on. I have a number of essays in the works, two of which I'm getting close to reading aloud. I have read prior versions of these essays, but I've been working on them. That is, working on the sentences that make up the paragraphs that make up the essay, but also learning so much as I go along. Just learning so much, not by studying writing in an abstract way, but by trying to write and learning from what I'm doing and getting feedback from some people who are close to me and who bless me with that feedback. And I'm hoping that anyone that leaves a message or a comment on my videos about this writing offers me something that you take for granted when you're in school and surrounded by people who are paid basically to read your writing, and that is attention itself. So even a rejection is a positive form of attention because it itself is a positive form of information. Not that I would think that that's what anyone would say, but I do think that that is a part of why I'm doing this. But I also do think that there's a certain kind of value that is found in this particular journal writing as a value that is indirect. And the meaning that I have in that is that philosophical wonder is a source of great joy, and the sense of wonder and awe is paramount to feeling excited about living, which in many ways is a rare thing. You know, it's not sad. It would only be sad if you had expectations, but it's not sad. But the general lack of joy in most people is depressing when you think about it. But when you imagine what life has done to a lot of people, you know, you can sort of like not think that they would be otherwise. But there is a sense that awe and the sense of amazement that is offered by this liminal space, by this transitional space between waking and sleeping, is itself a wonderful kind of basis for maybe reimagining how your ideas and selfhood relate to reality itself. And of course, this space that I'm talking about can be in many different forms. Like, it can happen in different ways, because what I'm talking about is the intrusion into experience of a questioning, another kind of experience, which perhaps potentially destabilizes, but in many ways it offers us a kind of window, and it's a wonderful way of looking at reality just prior to how we are quick to create stories that explain away what temporarily might remain to us as a sense of luminosity, you know? And I think also, though, that it's also like biological, perhaps, because for some people it's in the morning, but other people at night, hence the twilight mezzanine that I mentioned. But for some people, that's staying up late at night. That's where they recover like this sense of seeing into the strangeness of opening up their blinds, a world that is so different than the daytime world. Like these are people that I used to call day sleepers, you know, people that live at night. And so there's a kind of like surrealness that's discovered even in that. But, you know, I already recorded a 40-minute video today, and so I could easily turn this into a 30 or 40-minute video and simply playing, you know, musically, because I see philosophy as a quasi musical process. So I could see myself playing upon the themes that are written within the pages of this journal entry. But I think I'll let it go for now. And um, yeah, I hope you have a beautiful night. I'm John Edward Woolley, and I'm having a good time doing this.